Hi, this is Rachel Endo, also known as Rachel Spangle, doing another Left Behind Parents legal log. Okay, so just to recap, what happened to me was I had gone through a full-blown custody battle in the United States over a 5-day period, and the judge decided I should have full physical custody and my husband should have tiebreaker legal custody and visitation in Japan. And I vehemently fought this decision because Japan is known as a black hole. On top of that, in addition to that, my husband had threatened numerous times that he would abscond with the kids. So I tried to put in many motions to prevent that, but he had a very convincing and zealous lawyer who convinced the judge that I was essentially trying to vindictively withhold the kids from him. So ultimately, the kids went to Japan, and when they didn't come back as I expected, I was then obviously very panicked. And then the sequence of events from there is what my main topic is I'm trying to get at on today's log, is that, what do you do when that happens? What do you do once you know your child has been abducted or detained or is not coming back? Well, for me, in regards to Japan, I was instructed to get a Hague lawyer and contact the State Department and Missing Children's and the police. I went to the police to put in a report, and they just didn't know what to do. They were like, well, they're not in the U.S., so there's nothing we can do. So we're not even going to put in a report. And I was like, okay, I don't get that, but I can't really argue with the officer. So they did then try to tell me to put in a report with a different officer at a different area because I had just moved. So I guess I was originally trying to report to an officer to where I was living at the time of the abduction, but then they wanted me to, I think they were just passing the buck. Anyway, I never did get a police report in because they just simply couldn't do anything and didn't know what to do. And then I put in a motion to the court, because I was representing myself pro se at that point, to have a return order for the kids and a contempt order. And with the evidence that I had, it was pretty convincing from the get-go. So the judge ordered that we have a status hearing the following week. And although that could be, slightly useful, for the most part, once the kids are in another jurisdiction, it's kind of useless at that point. Your home state's court doesn't really have any power at that point. So I also contacted the State Department, and while the State Department is supposed to help, they're the main point of help for this sort of thing. And I was repeatedly told by many people, including congressmen and senators and all of my government officials, to go to the State Department. And essentially they just kind of don't do anything for you, basically. What they instructed me to do was to file a Hague Convention petition. And I didn't have money for a Hague lawyer, and I didn't have a Hague lawyer. And I went to legal aid, and they said they were going to look for a Hague lawyer, and I waited about a week or two, and they never found me one. So I became a Hague pro se lawyer at that point and turned in my own petition. But I turned that into the State Department, and then they forwarded that to the Japan Central Authority. And that process took maybe, from the time I mailed it to them, took them about a week to look it over. And then once they mailed it to Japan, it took Japan about 2 weeks to respond. And then they had issue with my my address. So I took that as stalling. So Japan's main tactic is stalling because of their continuity principle. The longer the children are in Japan, the more the better their argument is to keep them in Japan. So in between that time, actually, I had also tried to make a visit to Japan to see if I could see my children or possibly bring them back with me if that was acceptable or legal. And this is a very, very sketchy area because depending on whether or not your children cry or are opposed to going with you, or if your spouse has approved or not approved of their going with you, this can be a very subjective area. So it kind of boils down to whether or not your children voice a problem with going back with you, which is it's a very strange and unbelievable concept that the law is based on, your 5-year-old or 6-year-old child's attitude that day if they want to go with their mommy or not. So, you know, rather than risking that and even possibly traumatizing my children even further, I decided, I'm not going to try anything that could jeopardize me getting the kids back in the end. But some people actually, that was their only option, and some people have successfully gotten their kids back that way, from Japan specifically. But what happened was I had visited Japan to try and see or recover my kids if it was legal and acceptable, but that did not pan out. So I had actually that's a whole nother story. I'll go into that maybe on another log. But eventually I got my Hague application in, and once that was in, then that prevented jurisdiction from changing to Japan, which I was trying to avoid, because then I would have to relitigate custody, which what I had already done, which had already spent months and months doing and painful emotional torture going through court and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I wasn't about to do that again. So that is how that all transpired for me once they had been taken. And most people will just tell you go to State Department and you kind of trust that they're going to take care of things for you, but that's not the way it is. You kind of have to take care of everything yourself. So after I turned that in, I had a Hague case number, and then from that point I was safe of jurisdiction problems. And then in the end I ended up getting a Japanese lawyer who advised me to skip a Hague case if possible, and we tried to jump straight into filing a habeas corpus case. So I'll go into detail on that on the next log. Thank you.